I'm a version of myself when I'm on that show as well, and I'm a version of myself when I'm on stage. I don't feel like it's dishonest, because it's that I am like that quite a lot of the time, but it's a heightened version of me.
Yeah.
And if that was me all the time, then no one would want to be around me.
Welcome to Ireland Unfiltered. This week's guest is Jack Whitehall. Jack is playing in the 3 Arena on the 17th and 18th of December as part of a new stand-up tour he's embarking on, which I imagine will be as hugely successful as so many others have been, and another example of his wide range of talents. It was really interesting talking to him about what, as his career progresses and he becomes successful in all different disciplines, what brings him back to one of the most frightening to my eyes, which is standing up in front of an audience and trying to make them laugh. But it was interesting to hear him talk about how that began, and why, as somebody who comes from a very privileged background, which he hasn't, which he's always embraced and not tried to deny, that the truth of standing on stage on your own is something that is kind of liberating and refreshing. We talked about a lot more about how the public school system in England has created a generation of leaders who have done so much damage, and an awful lot more. It was a really fascinating interview with a really likable guy. Before we go to it, don't forget to subscribe to Ireland Unfiltered on all the usual channels, and if you like the show, please leave a review. Jack, you're very welcome to Ireland Unfiltered.
Thank you very much for being on the show.
It's great to have you here. You're about to embark on a tour which sees you in Dublin in December in the 3 Arena. What is it like what is the overriding emotion you have when you embark on a tour?
I think at this point, I'm just starting doing preview shows. And when you do preview shows, there's a lot of apprehension, and I get very nervous and very anxious about the show, and more so than anything else, just because all these tickets have been bought and people are coming to see the show, and I feel a great deal of pressure, and it's all on you as well. You really have to deliver. And then as the previews pass and you begin to hone the show, and then it becomes ready for the big arena dates, then I get very, very excited, and it's my first love. It's what I started doing when I was 18. It's what I always wanted to do, and this for me is like the pinnacle of that journey, to be able to go and do a show in an arena to people that have come to see me, and so nothing really beats it in terms of the excitement and the adrenaline of doing it as well. Nothing comes close to that. It's a very hard thing to replace in any other.
And is that a thing when you say it's your first love, but that feeling, we've had a number of comedians on this show, they talk about that sort of journey from the sort of worry and the anxiety to the adrenaline. Is that the kind of the payoff for all that anxiety?
Yeah, I think so. And part of the reason it is so exciting is because it is so terrifying as well. And there's very few things in your professional life that still scare you and give you jitters like doing a live show of this scale. So I think, yes, it's definitely worth it. And the adrenaline is such a real thing, and you do sort of forget about it. But even doing like my first preview show the other night, I came off stage and I was like, I remember this. I'm not going to be able to go to bed until like 2:00 in the morning, and I'm probably going to need half a bottle of wine just to like bring myself back down to normality. And it is such a thing. But
when you're playing those big stadiums, then like, is that an even greater, like, how do you like unwind? How do you bring yourself down after like a kind of rock star sort of show? Yeah,
well, it is very hard, and you have to be very strict with yourself not to like, because after every show it feels like you've put on a big event. If you want to go like, I'm going to go out and get drunk now, and I'm going to celebrate, and I'm going to stay up, and but then you're straight on to the next one the following night, so you have to be quite strict with yourself, and stay quite focused. But I really want to like put on a show with each of the dates that I do on my tour, and I really do like, I have a lot of production value, and I have a big musical number at the end, and there'll be a big opening routine of some sort, and I'm quite a physical performer, so I try to really ramp things up, because I also think if you're in those types of venues, you kind of have a duty to, because most people are buying tickets to the 3 Arena to go and watch, Ariana Grande or Lady Gaga, and if I'm going in there, then I have to. I'd feel like I was cheating my audience if it was just me and a microphone, which my promoter hates, because he's like, you and a microphone would be a lot easier and a lot cheaper. And I'm like, no, but I feel like I want to do more, and I can do more. And from the other shows that I do, like League of Their Own and things like that, where I'm no stranger to doing kind of big silly stunts and things like that. I think it fits with my kind of brand of humor. So I always try to really throw everything that I can at it and make it an event rather than just a gig.
And is that something, when you say you have a show, like you feel that, like at that moment where you feel you have a show, like what is the development of that idea when you start thinking, right, this is what my next stand-up show is going to be?
Well, it normally comes from doing gigs and like creeping back into pubs and clubs and going up and doing unannounced sets, and that tends to happen when you've been stuck on a job where you've been sat on set doing nothing all day and you're just bored to tears. And you're like, I could go and do 15 minutes at this comedy club in Soho and just throw some stuff out there and see how it goes. And then one of those goes well and you're like, I've definitely got the taste for this again.
Right, okay.
And then before you know it, you're like writing new material, and your brain switches as well, I think, because when, at the end of a tour, I switch off, and my like stand-up brain definitely shuts down for a bit, and I live my life a lot more normally. But then once you're in the mode of going, I have a tour, suddenly your brain changes and the way you live your life changes, and you're always looking for bits and material and observations. And you read every sign as you pass it in case there could be a thing on that, or you definitely live life in a different way when you're looking to try to like bring together a show and find more material. And so and also like those terrible things that comedians do of like trying bits of material out in social situations and trying to road test stuff without telling people. So there's a lot of that, which is why I don't think I could do it all the time, because I think if I did it all the time, I would be unbearable. Right. Because I am kind of unbearable in the run up to a show, because it's all about the show. And
because is that you? Is that your personality? When you talk about the big show you put on and all that, and your duty you have to the audience, like reading interviews with you and listening to interviews with you this week, I feel like that's, you're very aware of that, but it's a different you to the person you are a lot of the time.
Yeah, I would say that's very true. And, the me on stage is definitely a persona. It's much closer to who I am in real life than past personas that I've had. Or, I think, in the same way that like my dad is a version of himself on that show that I do with him, I'm a version of myself when I'm on that show as well. And I'm a version of myself when I'm on stage. I don't feel like it's dishonest, because it's that I am like that quite a lot of the time, but it's a heightened version of me.
Yeah.
And if that was me all the time, then no one would want to be around me. And it's slightly the thing why I think, meeting comedians is such a bitter disappointment for people, because we're not the person that you see up on stage, and we are, a lot of us, a persona, and keeping up that kind of persona all the time would be exhausting and impossible. And so therefore when you meet the person, you're like, oh, you're not like the guy I see in those films or the guy I see in those DVDs. It can be a little bit of a letdown.
Is it easier to, like, because you have so many strings to your bow now, and I was going to ask you about that, like you've sort of answered it for me there, but I was going to ask you how you decide what you're going to do at any one time, whether it's acting or comedy or whatever. But clearly, like as you say, sitting around on a studio is when the comedy might get going. But is it easier in some ways when you're acting, because you're playing somebody else, you're being a part?
Yeah.
Is it easier to keep kind of more of yourself to yourself?
I think so, and I think my focus definitely shifts, and it's a slightly kind of sad realization that I am always wanting to do whatever I'm not doing at the time.
Right, okay.
Whatever I'm doing at the time, I'm like, I think I might be happier doing other thing that I sometimes do. And then you go, okay, well, when I finish doing this, I'll go and do that. And then that'll make me happy for a bit. And then you do it. And then you get to the end of the tour and you're like, I'm so bored of the sound of my own voice. I need to go and just do something completely different.
And that is kind of the human condition, isn't it? Always thinking, like you could be on a friend of mine tells a story of being on a perfect holiday in Tuscany or somewhere, having rented this amazing place, looking out over, vineyards or whatever, and just sitting there and the sun sets and goes, we should have gone to, we should have gone somewhere else.
It's so true.
And, no matter what, there's always some nagging voice that says we should have done this or we should have done that.
Which Instagram is also really helpful. You can literally see the place you'd rather be.
Take me back then when you say, this was the first, stand up was your first love, like first thing you always wanted to do. Where did that come from? Where did you get, because, we know your background. We know that, entertainment was, you were surrounded by it. But why did you think comedy was the thing you wanted to do always?
I think it was that sense of being able to do it off your own back and not be reliant on anyone else. And that probably came from when I was at school wanting to make people laugh and then thinking, well, how can I do this to a bigger audience and in a more professional situation? And therefore that was like school plays and things like that. And that didn't really work out for me at school. So then I had one of those personalities where I was like, well, if the school aren't going to help me do it, then I'm going to have to find a way of doing this myself and putting things on off my own bat. And then I ended up doing like sketch shows and putting on little like gigs in like pubs, and I put my own play on at school. And then the minute I'd done that and done it in front of an audience and entertained people, I was completely bitten by the bug of it and wanted to do it more. And then I went to the Edinburgh Festival, and that's when I saw it being done professionally for the first time. And I saw stand-up as a viable thing that you could go and do, and it was like a career.
Right.
And then there was like no looking back. I was like, I have to get to the Edinburgh Festival, and I don't care how I do it, but I need to get there. And again, I went to the school. I was like, maybe we could do a play and we could go out there. And the school were like, no, we don't think that's a good idea and it's a waste of time. So I was like, okay, I'll just do it off my own bat. And I put together a sketch show with two friends, and we went up to Edinburgh and we did a month there. And that's when I first started doing stand-up, was in this sketch show. I was terrible. I got like 1-star reviews. I was basically doing like an impression of what I thought a stand-up was. The material was so hack and so terrible. But there was like no looking back. I was like, okay, I'm in now. And like getting terrible reviews when you're kind of 17 for someone like me was like, well, okay, I have to prove all of these people wrong.
Was that how you felt about it? It didn't make you shrivel up?
It made me shrivel up, but I think very useful thing to have when you're a comedian. I must have just had like the hide of a rhinoceros and just was very, very ambitious because I loved it, and I knew that having done this and tried this, that I wasn't going to be happy doing anything else. So it gave me a lot of kind of incentive to try and prove them wrong and to prove them that I could actually do it and that I could be a good stand-up. And so then I just like took every gig that I could and tried to get better. And there's this great thing that every comedian at some point has been told when they start out, and it's the thing that was the most frustrating thing to hear as a comedian when I was first doing it, which is they go, oh, you've got the odd good joke, and you're confident on stage, but you need to find your voice. And it was this like mystical thing that everyone said, like, you need to find your voice. I was like, what is my voice? Can you just tell me and I'll do my voice? And they're like, that's not how it works. You need to find your voice. I was like, oh my God, this is so annoying. And now, obviously, looking back, I understand completely what that meant. It meant that you had to find kind of truth, and you had to find a version of yourself that you can present on stage that is, that is true to yourself and that works and is distinctive and is interesting and is a good angle for comedy. And at the beginning, I was doing impressions of other comedians. I was doing like a deadpan version of Jack D and Stuart Lee, who were heroes of mine at the time, and that wasn't me. And then I started, talking like Russell Brand and doing a load of gigs where I was putting on like a Cockney accent, and there's footage of those, and every time I watch them I just like cringe and crease inside. But I was like, I don't want people knowing that I'm posh, because I think that's not going to fare well, and people aren't going to like that. If there's a posh guy up on stage telling jokes, I think they're going to hate me. And then going through all of that, and then working out that if actually what I needed to do was to be closer to myself and find a way of being myself on stage, but self-deprecating and creating a character that people could be on board with and laugh with. And then I guess eventually I found my voice, which is the voice that you see now, which is just a heightened version of me, and that isn't a bad impression of Jack Dee or Russell Brand.
Right, yeah. But you were saying, if people who don't know, your father was an agent, your mother was an actress. So like it was in the blood, you were surrounded by it.
Yeah.
But like, was that something, because, I went into a business that my father was in, and other people are totally averse to it. They never want anything to do. But were you, from a kid, were you excited by the stuff you saw your father doing, the people you saw?
Definitely. Yeah. I definitely saw that world and was very attracted to it, and it felt exciting and glamorous and cool and interesting. And I, had people that were close to me and in my life that were people that I really admired, and like Richard Griffiths, the actor, was my godfather, and he was someone that I would go and watch in plays in the West End, and he would be hilarious and have an audience in the palm of his hand, and was the most captivating stage actor I've ever seen. And so I definitely would go to things like that and see him and be like, oh my God, I'd love to do what Uncle Richard does.
Nigel Havers was another.
Well, the less said Nigel. He was
at your birth.
He was always loitering around as well. Do you want to come see me in a play as well? No, Nigel, I'm fine. No. He was great, and he was again like a man who I'd go and watch him on stage, and he's funny and he's like charming and charismatic, and I was like, that's the kind of person that I'd like to be when I grow up. Yeah. And so those two people were very important to me when I was growing up, because they were the people doing something that I saw, and I was like, I would like to do that. And my dad went, no way.
Your father was very against it.
He was very against it, because as an agent, he looked after successful actors like Nigel and Richard, but he also looked after a load of people that really struggled for work, that had gone into it and then dropped out of it. And he knew that it was a very hard industry to kind of make it in. So I think he was very keen that I went and did something a bit more traditional and got a degree. And
is it true he used to send you into the neighbour who worked for Goldman Sachs to kind of try and see if you like that?
Yeah, well, he always says that. He always says that he wished that I'd work for Goldman Sachs and become a lawyer or do something like a decent, honest profession. But then he let me go and study history of art at Manchester. So I don't know whether that would have necessarily been the right route to go to Goldman Sachs. I think it was just kind of, I think it was just like an apprehension. So.
But it is a hugely precarious business, isn't it? Even there's a story in the book the two of you wrote about Leslie Phillips, who was a very successful actor, but I think it's told as a joke, but like him calling just the day you were born, looking to see if any news on the job he was going for. And like that sort of sums up the sort of actor's life there.
Yeah, I think also by the time that I was about 18 or 17, 18 and deciding what I wanted to do, I think my dad had kind of fallen out of love with the industry a bit, and a lot of his clients had left him. His business was sort of winding down a bit, and he was thinking of retiring, and I think he was probably a bit disenchanted with the whole thing. And my mother as well had been an actress and had a very kind of up and down career, and she'd had some decent credits, and she's very talented, but she by no means made it in that industry. So I think they had enough information and enough awareness of the nature of the industry to be quite wary of me like diving into it and just solely committing to going to drama school and trying to become an actor. So that's why I think they were like, you need to finish school, you need to go to university, you need to go a more traditional route. And it backfired massively, because I turned around and went, I'm going to be a stand-up. They must have thought, oh, we should have let him go to drama school.
But was it a house? Because your family and especially your relationship with your father has become such a huge part of your career, and it's it's a very it's very funny, your relationship, but it's also a very tender, affectionate relationship that you portray. And I was wondering how much of that altered over the years, like, because it was like you were sent away to boarding school when you were 8.
Yeah.
Did you grow up in an affectionate house? Was it a house full of kind of warmth?
It was really, and people find that really weird when I'm like, it was a very affectionate, he was a very loving father. I mean, yes, he sent me away to live somewhere else, aged 8, that was 66 miles away from the family home, and came to see me once a week, which doesn't sound like a loving act, but I genuinely think he sent me there because at the school I was at in London, I was really struggling, and I was, he felt like I would have a better chance at the place that he sent me to, and I did, and so, but we did we always have had a very close relationship. I mean, obviously there's been moments like when I was back living at home, like 18, 19, I thought they were the most annoying people in the world and couldn't wait to get out of there, and we've had our moments, but we have a very close family unit, and he has always been someone that has inspired me, and he's always been a very witty person. And I guess, going back to talking about why I wanted to do what I do, I think the earliest memories of wanting to make people laugh in a very base level were from watching my dad entertain people, because he was always entertaining. He was always the funniest person in the room at any like dinner party or drinks party, or even amongst these actors, who were, I would be seeing on stage, like commanding a room and making thousands of people laugh in a theatre. But then afterwards in the dressing room, everyone would be turning to Michael and he would be making the jokes, and they would be like, oh, you must meet my agent. He's the funniest man in London. And I saw that and I thought, I admired it so much, and I was so in awe of him that I think that was the genesis of me going, oh, I want to be that person. I want to be the person that people turn to in the room. And
there were things you took straight from his life that you just took into your stand-up initially, was there?
Yeah.
Like stories like, his comment about Robert Mugabe.
Yeah, which kind of suddenly resurfaced a couple of months ago. Like my phone blew up. I was like, what's happened? Oh, Robert Mugabe's died. So that'll be why I'm getting all these notifications, because people are retweeting a routine from about 8 years ago. But he was, yeah, it's weird because back then I did all these jokes and no one knew who he was. So I would create, I'd have to do like, a couple of minutes of setting up who my father was, describing this character. It's a pretty easy character to get. But a lot of my shows would be spent creating this character that none of them knew, and then doing routines about him. And then now I've done this show. Like I find I can literally, with just the mention of his name gets a laugh from the audience,
okay, amazing.
And then I can literally just dive straight into to stuff about him, and people really enjoy it because I think they feel like they know a character, which is great. It's such a nice.
And you must have felt you had this great, as you brought him into your show, and you did the show, the original show, you did it in Edinburgh first, was it?
Yeah.
And you must have felt that like, this is great. I've got this this untapped comic goldmine for you, like which was your father.
Yeah. Well, that was why we did it in Edinburgh. Is that I'd done a load of jokes about him in shows, and then I went, I can't keep peddling these out because I need to find a different avenue for my stand-up, and so I did stop talking about him on stage. But my friend Ben Cavey, who's my producer at the time and directed my shows, he was like, well, you're going to be up at Edinburgh anyway, and people sort of know your dad now a bit, that the ones that have come to see your show, so you might as well just do something with him because he's coming up for a couple of days. Let's do a chat show. And so we did three chat shows at the Edinburgh Festival, and that was literally, and he was very reluctant to do them, but I was like, it'll be fun and I'll do most of the heavy lifting. You just got to sit there and make a few, wry comments. And it was one of those things where then because it's Edinburgh, there was a load of people from the BBC in, and they were like, "Oh my god, we've got to do this as a TV show." And we were genuinely like, "No, we don't want to do it as a TV show. This is not that was not the purpose of doing this. We literally just did this because we were both going to be up here and we thought it might be fun." And they really like pursued it so hard that we were like, "Okay, we'll do a pilot, and then that's it." And then we did the pilot, and then they were like, "You can have a series," and then we ended up doing like 3 series, and then at the end of that, I was like, "I don't want to be a chat show host. I've never wanted to be a chat show host. I had no interest in doing this. I was just doing it because it was a fun thing to do with my dad." And then Netflix were like, "How do you like to travel around the world with him? You can just do one-off little series. We'll send you to Southeast Asia, and then that can be the end of this journey." And now, I don't know, we've done like 3 seasons, and I did a live Christmas special with him. It's like, I can't created a monster.
And has it changed your relationship with him? Has it deepened it?
It's deepened it. It's made it a little bit more intense because we have our relationship as father and son. We have a business relationship as well, and now we also have a professional relationship like you would have with any double act, where there's a lot of working out bits and how, you know, our comedy dynamic should work in scenes and stuff like that, which is kind of really weird. So there are lots of layers to it, but it does mean we're in constant contact. And
because there's a very moving moment in the Netflix where you talk in the last episode, where you talk about, you know, how people come to you and, you know, say to you that like this is a wonderful thing and wonderful opportunity you get to spend this much time with your father. Is that something that you didn't expect to be a consequence of it, but it's something as the time goes on that you realize it is a consequence of it?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely am very aware of how lucky I am to spend that time with him, and I do really enjoy being able to spend the time with him. I think the flip side of it is that a lot of the time we spend together is in a kind of professional guise now, and the important thing is to try to ring fence time where we can just be a father and son and spend time just talking about, you know, football or, you know, whatever it is, like common interests that aren't work. And it's not always work, because at the moment sometimes it just becomes like we're like a double act that meet and work, and then, you know, it's important to remember to kind of spend some real life time together as well. So that's where it becomes, you know, tricky to get the right balance. But, you know, I am very, very aware of his age, and I'm very aware that he had me a lot later, and he is a lot older than, you know, he was a lot older than all of my other friends' fathers when I was at school. So, you know, I value my time with him immensely, and that's why I think at this juncture I'm more than happy to continue working with him and continue traveling around.
But it is something you will try to kind of keep that you think you'll do less of it just to try and keep that relationship more precious or more precious.
No, I think it's just like, I don't think I'll do less of it. I think I still do. I'd still like to do maybe one or two more if we can, you know, make it work to go and do a couple more, because they also, the more you do of them, the easier they come, because you know what the challenges are, and you know what you can handle and what you can't handle. Like the length of them, it was important to get the length of them down, because the first one we were on the road for so long, and it is really hard for, you know, he's like 79, and for a 79-year-old man to be like, you know, doing 6-hour drives in the back of a minibus up into the mountains of Nepal and then down, or, you know, it's like he can only handle so much. So I think we've got a little bit more careful about what the limitations are. But like in my tour show, the big finale is a story about travels with my father, something that happened when we were in Chernobyl, which was a very traumatic experience at the time, and was, you know, like he collapsed in Chernobyl and ended up in a hospital in Chernobyl, which is a very scary place to have an episode like that. And that was the moment where I was like, I think I've pushed him too far, and I felt like mortified. But now, a couple of years later, we've somehow managed to turn it into a comedy routine. Because I think for both of us, the best way to deal with something like that is to try and make a joke of it.
Right, yeah. And is that something that, you know, you talked about finding your voice there, and like that idea you had that, you know, if you were posh, that, you know, you couldn't be posh as a comedian. Like, that sense you had, like going to a boarding school, going to a couple of schools that were kind of elite schools.
Yeah.
How aware were you that that was a kind of insulated world at the time? And like how more aware of it did you become once you embarked on a kind of stand-up routine or stand-up career?
Far more aware. Like at the time, like I remember being at school and not considering myself to be posh, and also thinking, you know, because there were other people at my school that were like, you know, like gentry. So you would never consider yourself to be posh. I'm just like a normal middle class guy. Yes, I go to a boarding school, but I'm just like, you know, I'm not like the guy with a triple barreled surname that's in my history class.
Well, and in the class system in Britain is always very clear in establishing those differences, isn't it?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Even within posh, there's like three layers.
Remember they used to say of Michael Heseltine that, you know, he was a man who'd bought his own furniture, and that was seen as a kind of, you know, he's clearly not really posh.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Well, there definitely was that at my school as well. Like people that, you know, would be considered nouveau riche, and then people that would be considered like aristocracy because they were. But I never felt it when I was at school, and then I left school, and then it was like a bit of a culture shock. And we went to Manchester and went to university up there. I was like, oh no, I'm a massive posho. And then I was like, no one must know. I need to like completely mask this. I need to change my voice. I need to dress differently. I need to go to dubstep nights. I need to pretend to be interested in things that I'm not, because I just don't want anyone to know. And then I guess the realization is going, you can be yourself. You just have to be self-aware, and you have to be, you know, you just have to be aware of your privilege, and you have to find a way of, you know, talking about it and using it, and not like, not running away from it, and facing up to it, and using it as something as, you know, like I was like, I think it's better to go on stage and be open about it, and just self-deprecate and point out how ridiculous it is, my lifestyle and my privilege and my background, and send up the preposterousness of having gone to these schools and having these friends, and make a joke of it and make light of it, I think is a better route.
And is it easy, like at the same time, do you ever get sort of the idea that life is always easy is something that sort of some people will then push on people who have gone to certain schools and have a certain lifestyle? Do you resent like that idea?
Definitely. I mean, no, I don't resent it. I mean, I think it's true. Like, I think I've had so much opportunity and so many doors that are open to me. You know, there's no getting away from the fact that going to a school like mine, it was a huge like leg up in life, and you have so much privilege, and you have so many connections that are available to you. That said, I like to think that I've managed to pick an industry that is a meritocracy, because with stand-up, you can only get so many connections. You can only get so many like doors being held open for you. At the end of the day, if you're not funny and you can't make an audience laugh, you're dead. You are dead. Like there's no getting around that. So that, I don't know whether that was maybe in a way part of the appeal of like finding something like stand-up to go and do, because it sort of doesn't matter where you're from.
It's kind of a lonely business too, isn't it? It's you on a stage.
Yeah.
Like you're not surrounded by the protection of the public school system.
Exactly. And also that's why it's kind of great, is that probably TV less so. Like TV, I reckon, you know, you could get to, because someone's uncle worked at the BBC or whatever, there was probably a faster route to it. But if you went to the Comedy Store and asked Don Ward at the Comedy Store, could I have a 20-minute set? I went to Marlborough and this guy knows this guy. He would literally slam the door in your face. So I think that's a great thing about the comedy circuit. I think it's a really refreshing thing about the comedy circuit, is that like people get found out. And it is like, it's so honest, and it's you know, you just have to be good at what you do, and if you aren't good at what you do, then you'll only go so far. And audiences are just very honest, and they're very hard to con. So I think that's one of the good things about stand up.
And is it something that you became more aware of because, you know, it is a time in Britain where, you know, a lot of people, and it keeps going. You know, the last prime minister was, you know, but one was an old Etonian,
Yeah.
and now we have, you know, in Britain there's another
Yeah.
old Etonian. Like, is it something you become more conscious of when you see
Definitely.
these people?
Oh my God, yeah, like posh guilt, and when you see those people on TV is a very real thing.
Yeah,
And
posh
also-
guilt.
Yeah, I think you get a lot of posh guilt, but also it sort of depends on the school. Like my school was, you know, it was sort of artistic leaning. Like it was
Right,
the types of people that went there, maybe, or maybe that was just the circles that I was in. But it, like, I know Etonians, and I've met a lot of Etonians, and just the problem is they are literally, you know, they're like bred to think that they are made to rule.
Yeah.
And even really like I've met a lot of Etonians that are really nice, and they would admit to it. Like that school, there's just something about it where, like, because it has that history and it has all those people. Obviously, that doesn't mean that everyone went to Eton thinks that they're going to be prime minister, but I think there is definitely.
But it's a disproportionate amount that do.
It's insane. They have like 12 prime ministers who went to that school. So I guess it's quite hard not to be at this school and think, I could be prime minister one day, which is
or else I probably will be.
I probably will be prime minister one day. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's so weird that is the case.
And what have you meant?
I'm allowed to say that, by the way, as well, because I tried to get into Eton and they didn't want me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I failed. I failed the entrance exam, like, drastically. They were like, he's not smart enough to be here.
He's not prime ministerial
He's
material.
not prime ministerial material. He can maybe working as a councillor somewhere.
Although, given how it's gone over the last few years, I'd say you could have done a good job.
A better job as prime minister. I don't know about
Yeah.
that.
How have you made?
Maybe it could be.
What do you make of that at the moment? Because it does seem like, again, that elite, the sense of there's an elite driving something that isn't necessarily good for, and, you know, in Ireland it's become something that has brought up, you know, old antagonisms, an old sort of sense of you know, colonial, if you like, kind of view of England, which was gone.
Yeah.
And it's kind of unfortunate. Like, I lived in England for a long time, and I loved living there.
Yeah.
And it seems unfortunate that through the actions of that kind of public school, as you say, a certain type of public school thinking, that these old kind of antagonisms are raised up again.
Yeah, I find it deep. I find it really depressing, and I think as someone that went to a public school that has a conscience, and the fact that I went to that type of school sits quite heavily with me. I feel like everything I'm doing, I don't know. I just want to get, when I go out on stage, like, part of the thing is like, I want to just be like, we're not all like that. Like, some of us care,
Right?
Some of us aren't like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no getting away from the fact that it's very uneven, and it's really as someone that comes from a background of privilege, you watch the behavior of some people that are from the same background as you, and it really makes you kind of upset and depressed. And also because you see those people, and I see those people on TV, and I know that guy. I remember that guy at school, and he was at my school, and he was the one at school that, like, you would avoid in the corridor because he would,
Right.
And then that's the one that's now like Home Secretary, and you're like, oh, this is so depressing,
Right.
because it's never it's always, it just attracts a certain type of person.
Yeah.
I think
That type
and it's
of-
a thankless task. It's like I don't know why anyone would want to go into politics, especially at the moment. But yeah, it's. I mean, I don't talk a lot about politics.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
do
I
a lot
know.
of politics
Yeah,
in
yeah.
my show, and I kind of run away from it and try to bury my head in the sand a little bit, just because I find it a little bit depressing. And
But you say it has, like, where your background sort of made you quite conscious of having a kind of a social conscience anyway.
I think so, yeah. And that's also from my mom.
Right.
But it's a weird, it was a weird household to grow up in from a political point
Yeah,
of
yeah.
view, because I grew up with, like, #1 Tory.
Right,
Like,
your dad coming in reading Simon Heffer columns to
Yeah.
you when you're in bed with a girl.
yeah, like the most ardent conservative supporter. Like he's got Margaret Thatcher Toby jugs all over the house, and like every book that on Winston Churchill that's ever been written, true, in our house. And then my mum, who is definitely not that. So
Yeah.
I think that allowed me to grow up with a far greater perspective than had I just been raised by my dad, in which case I'd probably be doing this interview in a tweed jacket, and the content would be very different. My gigs would be rallies rather than shows. So yeah, I'm thankful that my mother was there to really, she's a very, very big influence on the way that I see the world.
Right. And that's something maybe because you've had this, public career with your father, that maybe sometimes gets forgotten, does it?
Yeah, definitely. And she's a very important person in my life. She's a very, very caring, very generous woman.
She's a doula, is she?
Yeah, she's a doula. She, she's had loads of different jobs. She came from a very working class background. She didn't go to university. She worked straight out of school. She's done loads of different jobs. She was an actress for a little bit. She was a doula. She does a load of charity work. She's like a saintly woman.
Right.
And somehow is married to Michael, and they have this amazing relationship that in its own way works really well, and they're like an amazing double act themselves. They both are a huge influence on my life, but I think maybe people only see my father, and there's definitely elements of him in my character, but my mum is very, very important as well.
How much more do you want your acting side of your career to develop over the next few years? Because in the series with your father, you talked about going to live in LA possibly.
Yeah.
Is that something that you would pursue?
Yeah, I would like to pursue that. I mean, I love acting, and I love, for me, I guess the end game has always been to try. I'd love to make, those classic. I'd love to make a classic comedy film that people watch for the next 40 years. Like that's the dream for someone like me, is to create one of those kind of like magical films. And so I would like to develop that, and I really enjoy acting. I don't necessarily enjoy LA that much because I think I miss home too much when I go there, and it just feels like too alien a place for me to spend too much time in. So I think if I did ever go over there, I would have to come back quite a lot, and probably couldn't live over there quite yet. But then again, who knows, in a couple of years my head may be so far up my own arse that I might be ready to go to Los Angeles and just go full LA. I'll get the teeth done.
Did you audition for Brian May in the Queen in Rhapsody?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. That's kind of how this ending for the latest show ended up happening. Is that so? I auditioned for the Queen film, and my agent said that I could play the guitar to a good degree. I've never picked up a guitar in my life, so that backfired quite drastically.
How quickly did you get found out on that?
Oh, like instantly. Right. Because I'm a terrible liar. It's like, so you can play the guitar? I was like, no, I've never played the guitar in my life. And then the whole audition, it was like dead from then on in. But then I think somehow it was like, then people could assume that I could do musicals, because I think I'd auditioned and got in the room for that. So then they sent me up for another musical, which I did like a non-musical audition for. I just read for the part, and they were like, oh, this is good. But we are going to have to send you off for musical assessment. So I went off and I got assessed musically by a guy who's like a vocal coach who's really nice. And I've never sung before in my life. I'm terrified of singing. I've always said, if anyone says, can you sing? I'm like, no, I'm completely tone deaf. Anyway, he coached me through it. And I think the response or the feedback after that vocal assessment was that my voice was salvageable, that if they auto-tuned it enough and with enough training, that I could get it to a level where if loads of other people were singing in the scene, it wouldn't be terrible, but salvageable was the word. And that was enough enthusiasm, and that was enough of praise for me to go, I need to do a musical number at the end of my tour show. I heard someone say that my voice wasn't terrible and with enough autotune could be fixed. And I thought, I'm going to be a musical star now. And that tells you everything you need to know about me. Is that I need very little encouragement.
To just go for it.
Just go for it. I'm going to Edinburgh. I'm putting on a sketch show. I'm going to become a stand-up. Your voice isn't actually terrible. I'm going to be a musical star now.
Jack, it's been wonderful having you here.
Oh,
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, really nice to chat to you.
Well, that was Jack Whitehall. He is playing in the 3 Arena on the 17th and 18th of December. Before we go, don't forget to subscribe to Ireland Unfiltered on all the usual channels. And if you like the show, please do leave a review.